9% of humans who've ever lived had no concept of nationality. For millennia, humans identified with families, villages, or tribes, never nations. This idea that we belong to a country, tied to borders, flags, and passports, is shockingly recent, entirely man-made, and constantly changing. Today, we'll uncover how national identity was invented, how fragile it really is, and why it's far from a fundamental part of humanity. For most of human history, borders weren't guarded, and people moved freely. The idea of strict border control only became widespread in the 19th and 20th centuries. Even passports, now seen as essential, are a modern invention. Before World War I, almost no one needed documents to travel. Passports only became common in the 1920s, thanks to the League of Nations, as a response to the chaos of mass displacement caused by war. Even today, borders and national identities are less rigid than they seem. Look at nations literally spanning continents. Russia stretches across Europe and Asia, making some Russians distinctly European and others Asian. Similarly, Turkey straddles Europe and the Middle East, bundling vastly different cultures into one identity. And let's not forget cities like Strasbourg in France or Kaliningrad in Russia, both previously a part of Germany and shifted countries multiple times, leaving residents with layered allegiances. Barley, a town where the border between Belgium and the Netherlands runs through houses and cafes, lets you literally drink coffee in one country and pay in another. Many communities don't fit neatly into national boxes. The Pashtun people, for instance, live on both sides of the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, bound by culture, not state lines. Identities have always been, layered. Let's look at France as an example. Historically, the land we now call France was a patchwork of communities speaking Breton, Occitan, and other regional languages. Loyalties lay with villages or regions rather than a distant king. Even today in Barcelona, people see themselves as Catalan, Spanish, and European, depending on the context. Millions today are stateless, denied the recognition of any country. The Rohingya in Myanmar are one tragic example, living without citizenship, rights, or legal protections. This isn't an anomaly. It's a reminder of how fragile national systems really are. Most countries today didn't exist 150 years ago. Italy unified in 1861, but back then, only 2.5% of its population spoke Italian. The idea of being Italian was almost non-existent. Similarly, Eritrea only became independent in 1993, and East Timor in 2002. Even citizenship is a modern concept. For most of history, people were subjects of rulers, not citizens of states. Citizenship as a legal identity only emerged in the 18th and 19th centuries. Look at a map of Africa, and you'll see straight lines slicing through the continent. These borders, drawn at the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 85, were imposed by European powers with zero regard for local cultures or communities. Entire tribes were split between countries, while others were forced together under artificial nations. How do you turn scattered people into a nation? Mass media and education. In the 19th and 20th centuries, newspapers, radio, and television told shared stories that united people under a national narrative. Schools played a massive role too. In France, laws banned regional languages like Breton or Occitan to enforce a standardized French identity. In Turkey, Kurdish was suppressed in favor of Turkish. These policies erased local identities to build national ones. Nations can appear and disappear in the blink of an eye. The Republic of Texas lasted just 9 years before joining the United States. Yugoslavia, once a unified state, splintered into multiple countries by the 1990s. Even today, Taiwan operates in a geopolitical gray zone, seen as a country by some and a breakaway province by others. Maps with fixed borders are barely a few centuries old. Before the 17th and 18th centuries, maps focused on trade routes and landmarks, not political boundaries. The idea of clearly defined borders is an invention of modern cartography. National identity is always evolving. Lebanon was a Christian-majority country in the mid-20th century, but is now predominantly Muslim. South American nations, once home to rich indigenous cultures, were reshaped entirely by colonization. And in Europe, many people now see themselves as European in addition to their nationality. Global cities like New York show how sometimes local identities, such as New Yorker, can be stronger than ethnic or national identities. You don't have to be American to be a New Yorker, or a particular background. Could nationality eventually fade, replaced by something more inclusive? Or go the other way and become more isolationist and divisive? National identity feels permanent, but it's a young, fragile invention. Borders, flags, and passports didn't exist for most of human history. Nations were built through myths, media, and often violence. As we face global challenges, maybe it's time to imagine new ways of belonging, ones that unite us beyond the lines on a map. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more, and let us know in the comments how strongly you feel your national identity. Let's rethink what it means to belong. Stay curious.